Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Mad Mamluks. I'm Mahi and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mort and SIM. On today's show, we welcome back a very special guest and friend of the Mad Mamluks for the third time, Sheikh Joe Bradford. Joe is an American scholar of Islam, an instructor, and an ethical investments advisor. His background is that he has a bachelor's and master's from the Islamic University of Medina and the Faculty of Sharia. So Joe, welcome back. How you doing?
Alhamdulillah, good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. How y'all recovering from Hurricane Harvey down in Houston?
The recovery is happening, but it's slow. And thank you for asking too. It's been a month, and it's easy to kind of let it get out of sight, out of mind. Let's get back to normal and forget that there's still thousands of people that have lost their homes, lost everything. I mean, just yesterday I got a call from a friend that, people in our immediate circle, this person lost everything they have. This person lost their car. This person, lost maybe the first floor of their home. They're not sure if it's going to be condemned. There's fears of E. coli at certain places.
Mold too, right? There's a lot of mold in there after this kind of event, and it seems like it has so much humidity that would hinder any kind of mold removal attempts as well.
Well, yeah. So in certain places you had the reservoirs flood, and those flooded the sewers, and the sewage water went up into the homes. I went to an area to do some cleanup, and man, I mean, it was just like walking through like a truck stop bathroom or a porta potty.
Wow.
It was really, it smelled really, really bad. I mean, you can just tell that everything had been polluted. And so those areas are actually, there's talk now of those areas being bought with federal dollars and just turned into green space, meaning that they'll buy them, they'll turn them into parks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because, if last year, the floods in Houston, they said, hit the 300-year level, and they were never supposed to, right? Everybody, somehow knows magically when they're supposed to not hit levels. And then this year, they were saying it was going to hit like a 500-year level, and then it went up to like 800-year level floods. So some people are saying it's just futile for us to keep, rebuilding homes that are in flood areas that are just getting sequentially worse every year. So why don't we just buy those spaces with the federal dollars that we're getting, and then we'll turn those areas into parks. And if the areas flood again, there's no real loss. For example, around one of the major reservoirs here in Houston is a very, very large park called George Bush Park. It was actually inaugurated by the former president in the name of his father. Really large place, really a lot of awesome stuff you can do over there. There's like soccer fields, baseball fields, radio airplane fields, remote control airplane fields, lots of different stuff. But at the same time, whenever it floods, the reservoir floods, and then all of the reservoir water that goes into that park. And the park you can maneuver around it. So it essentially turns into this gigantic retention pond. And, nobody's homes are damaged. If you can imagine, in this flood, that entire park was flooded, and all the neighborhoods that were around it with at least a foot of water. I mean, some people, it's hard for them to imagine how much water was coming down. I was talking to some friends of mine from New York, and I said, 51 inches of rain, and they couldn't get it. And I said, think of the blizzard that you guys had, the snowstorm that you guys had a couple of years ago. They were calling it snowpocalypse, right?
Yeah.
Like 3 years ago. So it's like 3 times bigger than that.
Wow.
And 51 inches of rain, 10 inches of snow for every 1 inch. So you're talking about 500 plus inches of snow. That's like 6 stories of snow.
Wow.
just to give like the listeners some idea about what was going on. So, and this was all within like a 48-hour period. So, I'm really glad that the judge and following him, the mayor and others, decided not to evacuate, and that everybody, while they were flooded, alhamdulillah, there was a lot of lives that were saved because of that.
There's a lot of second guessing that happens after these type of events, right? One thing that we don't have to second guess about is something that we could do proactively, is set up a will in the event of your life after these events. And I know like you're involved in a lot of in that area of creating Islamic wills. Are you can you talk a little bit about what My Wasiya is all about, and help the listeners understand that it's not a very complicated process? Because when I was on the website, it seemed like it's a very simple step-by-step process, and then you get your will generated and get it notarized. Am I correct?
Yeah. So, one of the things that working in the area of finance, and a lot of times people, there are interrelated areas of finance and law and just kind of preparedness that people have to, that people need, that they don't realize are kind of interconnected, and they put off to later in life. And one of those is definitely having a will. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, that none of us should sleep لا يبات ليلتين وعنده ما يوصى أو يوصي به إلا وصيته مكتوبة عند رأسه أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. The hadith is in Bukhari that none of us should sleep for more than 2 nights possessing something that can be bequeathed or willed to others, except that his will is written and at his head when he sleeps. Meaning that it's there, it's ready, it's prepared. It can be properly probated and disposed of. Doing some use case studies a few years back, my partner and I, Muhammad, we decided, who's an accomplished attorney in estate planning and other areas, we were talking about this issue of, he was like, man, everybody comes up to me, and asks me for a will, and quite frankly, as a lawyer, it might not be worth my time, just the cost that I would need to expend for my firm. Most people don't want to pay that because obviously, there's drafting and overhead and all of that involved. And I said, yeah, and myself, as a you want to say a community leader or a scholarly figure in the Muslim community, people will come and ask me, and my problem is I can tell you what to do, but having that drafted and working with a lawyer to make it legally binding is always a challenge. So we said, why don't we put our heads together, put our skills together, brought on a developer. We took about 3 years and we developed My Wasiya, which essentially is like LegalZoom for Muslims. So you need a will. You're not sure, you don't want to get some free template off of the internet. You don't know who drafted it. It's got all kind of mistakes. May not even be applicable to your state's laws. You don't want to spend thousands of dollars on an estate planning attorney to draft up documents that he might not even understand himself and therefore do incorrectly. Let's make a product that 85% of the Muslim community is going to be using. It's going to be, Sharia compliant and legally valid for whatever state they're in. So we actually had to go state by state with the different, laws, make sure that all the documentation was in line with that. We used a developer to create an algorithm in the background that dynamically creates a document and drafts it. So it's not fill in the blanks. It's, Mahin or SIM or Mort, you sign up and then you answer a very easy questionnaire online, we call it our online interview. And then at the end, once you've answered all the questions, it outputs a will for you. Download that, print it out, have it notarized or attested to by 2 adults in your presence when you sign it, and boom, you've got a got a legally valid Sharia compliant will that will protect you, protect your, the guardianship of your kids, dictate how your estate's going to be divided up, and also, how your funeral is going to be run.
And how many questions are involved in this whole process? Because whenever I think about even approaching a subject like this, I get intimidated by, man, this type of questionnaire is probably going to ask me to, dig up all my, receipts, and, it kind of reminds you of tax day, right? Or tax time when you're getting ready to do your income taxes and everything. So what does all this entail?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and that was one of the things that we were worried about as well. And that's why we worked with a developer so long to get it right, is because we didn't want people, taking days and weeks to get things done, or even hours. The average user finishes their will within about 45 minutes.
Wow.
And that's because when a user is married, they're going to say, "Oh, honey, who should we appoint as personal representatives? Should we have the same person or different people? Or who do you want to have guardianship of the children when we pass away? Let's make sure that we've got the same person. So, well, wait until we'll talk about it, or let me give you a call." They discuss, and it takes a little bit more time. Some people, like, a single person, or people who have already kind of discussed these issues, they could finish within 20-25 minutes.
Nice.
So, the whole thing is about democratization of access to those things that meet our values as Muslims.
On the same wavelength, making a will is something you're doing to prepare for the future. And the rage these days seems to be about something called Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies as far as investments, or something that is also along those lines. And that's something that you hear a lot about. I know you recently put out an article on your blog about Bitcoin, but summarize for the layman what exactly Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are as far as an investment vehicle.
So cryptocurrencies are like any other currency. They're a digital a digital vehicle for the transfer and storage of wealth. So just like you use Chase Quick Pay or PayPal, and you have dollars in your account, right?
Right.
Or let's say, for example, it's kind of like for those of you that that are listening, that game, you've got in-game credits and stores in a game. Well, that's not real money. It's real money in that world, right? But it's a system separate from your centralized banking. So the difference between cryptocurrencies and regular currencies is that cryptocurrencies do not rely upon a central authority to issue that currency. It builds itself off of something called the blockchain. And
the blockchain is a ledger, right? It's like
the ledger basically records all of the transactions that are built up in the blockchain. So, Mort has a Bitcoin, and he's the one that mined it, and basically, think of it like in olden times of somebody mining gold out of a mountain and striking it into a coin, and then he sells, or he buys something from SIM, and now let's say, for example, he buys, audio editing services, and now your name is etched into the Bitcoin, all right?
Yeah.
After his, and
right.
then you buy something from Mahin, or you gift it to Mahin, and then Mahin's name is now, there, and then Mahin and I, Mahin tries to buy my silence, and sends me a Bitcoin, and so and my name is now on the ledger. So it's kind of like an isnad for your transaction history.
And the whole community is involved, as opposed to the traditional way of currency is that there's a middleman, like a bank or a financial institution, that's keeping track of the transaction and ensuring that the transaction was completed. And
yeah. So it's just, distributed ledger means that there's no one central authority that is vouching for or verifying all of the transactions. And because of that, there seems to be some delay in transfer of cryptocurrencies when they're transferred, given the length of the blockchains and things like that. I mean, dealing with cryptocurrencies, there's two things that in dealing with any business or any currency, there's always two considerations. One is after its use, right? After it's out there. Is somebody comes and says, "Oh, is it allowed for me to buy and sell Bitcoin?" Well, yeah, it's allowed for you to buy and sell Bitcoin. Well, why is that? Well, it's because the idea that we are devotionally bound to using gold and silver is one that does not hold up within Islamic law and Islamic finance. And I know it's a very nostalgic view amongst some Muslims, but there is literally absolutely no evidence that we have to use gold and silver, right? So those arguments are always utilitarian arguments about the independence of Muslim peoples and their ability to just, escape the global, evil capitalist monetary system and things like that.
Right.
But as far as religious evidence, there's nothing that says, "Oh, you who believe, use gold and silver." Just gold and silver were used at the time of the Prophet ﷺ,
right.
Simply because they were the predominant currencies. And interestingly enough, the very first dirhams and dinars, dirhams being silver, dinars being gold. Dinar comes from the Roman, the Latin denarius, which is a coin of gold. Dirham comes from the Greek drachma, which is still the currency of Greece. Not the same, obviously, coin, but the name is still used. And many times the coins that they use would be Sassanid or Byzantine coins. So you would have Khusru on one side. And even until the year 70, when Abdul Malik ibn Marwan had a mint built in Syria and struck their own coins and standardized the weights, you would find La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah on one side, and on the other side a picture of the Sassanid or the Byzantine king.
Right.
So,
but Joe, a lot of people who are new to Bitcoin might not necessarily understand how it's even generated. So if you could kind of explain a little bit about how it's actually generated, in terms of the whole, how does the entire mining process work?
Yeah. So essentially, this guy came up with an idea of, how can we build a decentralized digital cash system?
Yeah. Satoshi Nakamoto.
So Satoshi Nakamoto, yes, who everybody says is possibly like an amalgam of different names and not his real name. And he's, this elusive figure.
Kind of like Kaiser Soze.
Yeah.
Yeah, the usual suspect, right? Nobody knows him.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is that it's a peer-to-peer system, right? So instead of worrying about a central bank, you're transferring everything peer-to-peer. The question becomes then, how do you obtain Bitcoin, right? So there's actually three issues. So let's talk about the first and most obvious one. With talking to people like, can I use Bitcoin or can I use crypto or not? The first and most obvious one is, can I use Bitcoin? Can I buy Bitcoins with my dollars and then use Bitcoins on the internet? And the answer is yes, because it's like any other currency. And that's where I was kind of getting to with the discussion of gold and silver. There's an interesting narration from Imam Malik, who Mahin will be very happy about this.
Yeah.
Now he'll the champion, the Maliki on the podcast.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Imam Malik, rahimahullah, he was asked about money other than gold and silver. And he said, if people were to take camel skin and cut it into equal portions and give it, and put it into units and give it a mint, or I forget the word that he used, he said, then I would consider it to be currency between them, and for the rules of riba to apply between it and other currencies as well. So essentially, your first fiat currency, which is a currency that's not backed by a commodity, would have been, camel skin. And that statement is actually said to have been said by Umar ibn Abdulaziz as well. But I think there's authentically, as far as asanid go, probably, it's a statement of Imam Malik and then was attributed to others later on. And the point being is that if people, endogenously, amongst themselves decide that X thing is going to be currency, then it's currency. And the rules of riba and of currency exchange apply to it. And that's, one of two broad approaches to currencies or valuing a currency. One of two broad approaches amongst Muslim scholars is that the reason for riba is either the parity in weight of an item or the parity in value of an item. Meaning, I have to go kilo for kilo, pound for pound, coin for coin because coins are standard weight. The other is in the value of that thing, meaning that I might have something that has no weight, like a dollar bill, but may weigh slightly different because of different, very small differences in the atomic weight of an item, but because I have divided it into equal units and all of those units are fungible, all of those units are the same and tradable at equal units, then for me to say $1 for $2 is definitely riba, right? Because I'm looking at the value of the unit and I'm not looking at the weight of the commodity that underscores it. So Bitcoin is basically, cryptocurrency is basically the same thing. The rules of currency exchange would apply. If you're going to buy and trade, if you have the same currency, you can't trade the same currency for itself for more than par. I mean, it has to be 1-to-1. So if I go dollars for dollars, Bitcoins for Bitcoins, it has to be 1-for-1. If I go different currencies, dollars for Bitcoins, then there should be a known exchange rate at the time of trade, and it should be a spot transaction. There shouldn't be any delay in the transaction. And so if you're going to use Bitcoin, if you're going to even speculate and buy Bitcoin, some people buy now and then they'll sit on it for a while and then they'll trade it later. That's fine. The second issue is the issue of mining cryptocurrencies, because essentially to mine the cryptocurrency, you have to have a certain amount of computing power to solve mathematical equations in the background. And by solving those mathematical equations, you're awarded with coins. You've got different things of validation, confirmation in the background. I mean, there's some more technical things to it that we don't have to go into.
But essentially, you're using a lot of power, right? A lot of electricity to generate a Bitcoin and in order to perform all these mathematical operations.
Yeah, and as the blockchain grows, then the of coins that are mined grows, the mathematical equations become more difficult, need more computing power, and therefore, you have to put more into it. I think even with some of these currencies, there was, proprietary hardware that you would have to buy as well, which I think those are the guys that probably made the real money out of all of this, is selling people, some type of plug-in for their computer to be able to mine things. So the mining process, and now you've got, proof of stake and proof of work issues. And I personally haven't done enough research on those to state a public opinion as to how those work. And if a person's going to be involved in mining, from what I've read so far, I think people should probably stay away from the process because it seems to be quite top heavy. And then in newer currencies like Ethereum and others, where they're using proof of stake, the more coins you have, the more you're rewarded in the future, which seems a bit unfair.
Kind of like a pyramid scheme, is that? I
don't know if I could say a pyramid scheme. I don't want to go out on a limb and then get torn apart by by cryptocurrency bros. But because people get really emotional about this for some reason.
Because people are making a lot of money off it. That's why.
Yeah, they're making a lot. And if they're making a lot of money and it's halal, good for them. But I always, my issue always is that great that you're making a lot of money. Do you actually understand what you're doing? I'm sure you guys remember back in the day, there were tons of pyramid schemes that were coming through. Minority communities, the Muslim community is no different. Phone cards back in the 90s. I think there was some scheme with coffee recently.
Yeah.
There was
Quick Start, Amway.
Yeah, exactly. Amway is funny. My brother-in-law was telling me, he's like, yeah, this guy at work, he's trying to sell me on Amway, and he's giving me the pitch. And I'm like, so this is Amway. And he's like, no, it's not. It's not Amway. It's not Amway. Just check it out. So then he take him to some, meeting, and it's hour-long presentation. And are you guys ready to sign up? And then, there's one of the questions, is this Amway? No, we're something completely different. And then, they go to sign papers at the end or pick up something with branding on it. And it's Amway branding on it.
Our very own guy, Mahin, used to be.
Yeah, I was in Amway for 2.5. Back then it was called Quick Start. They had to change the name.
Weren't you a top seller in the Ohio region or something?
I think my monthly checks were $2.70 from all the PV I did monthly, buying protein bars and energy drinks.
Mahin was only selling to fans of Michigan.
No, I was in Canada at the time, right? That's how I kind of became a Republican. That's a little side note, because Amway preached the whole political stuff, so Betsy DeVos, who's the education secretary now, right? She's from the Amway family.
Yeah.
So she's a good person to me.
Oh yeah, for you.
One thing about cryptocurrencies, though, I think people need to realize too how that currency is going to be used. It affects the weight it's going to have in the future. For example, some of these companies are going to be using certain cryptocurrencies for online purchasing. For example, there's a company called Stratus, and Microsoft is developing their platform to accommodate that cryptocurrency. So those kind of things affect how popular that coin is going to be in the future, because blockchain doesn't only change how we buy and sell things, it's just revolutionizing the whole e-commerce business, right? Just even internet speeds, everything how we're doing. For example,
no doubt.
I'm sorry?
No doubt. Yeah, I said no. I said no doubt. No doubt.
Yep.
And you bring up a very good point, and that is that while there's a claims of decentralization, I think it was just 2 days ago, South Korea shut down a major exchange, and it threw the markets into a spin, which shows you that, okay, yeah, sure, the transfer and the creation of these coins are decentralized, but why are they so affected by major market moves like this? Not that regular currencies aren't affected by major market moves like this, but it's the huge volatility is troubling, and shows that there's some issues here that really just can't aren't being taken into consideration, like you said.
Well, it's all about faith, right? All currency now is based on faith, and when market gets shut down, I, as an investor, would get scared and I would pull and cash out because I would think that they're I better get out while I'm ahead.
Well, the way I look at it is a lot of these currencies are IOUs, right? You're saying, hey, you have this amount of money, and this is what we owe you. If you want to cash out, this is what we owe you, right? But one of the things, and that's kind of one of the negative sides of cryptocurrencies, is that you don't really have any accountability. There are certain companies that are creating cryptocurrencies specific for specific markets, and if those markets collapse, that means that currency goes down with it, right? So right now there's no regulation on who can create cryptocurrencies. Right. For example, there's, one of the breakthrough technologies though is cryptocurrency can actually be used in a better way. In one way, it's bettering banking is they were able to do a transfer from Zurich to America, and that transfer took a fraction of a second to usually when banks did SWIFT to each other, they had to send out messages to communicate, open the lines, then want to SWIFT and
system. Yeah.
Exactly, they had to confirm and receive, and so cryptocurrency kind of eliminated that. And so which is kind of interesting, one of the currencies that's relying on the banks is actually a coin called Ripple coin, and that is actually a coin that was initiated by I think the government of Dubai. And the only problem, a lot of people, they're not encouraging mining or anything like that, but they're offering an ICO, which is like an initial coin offering. And the only thing that people don't like about that, though, is that the government of Dubai owns like 60% of that currency. Oh. So they can control kind of the pricing of the coin, but they are aligning themselves with banks. So that's kind of another angle where, hey, it may not be, go up exponentially, but it is a possible future currency that banks will be accepting between one another. So there's so many different angles to look at.
And that's the third area that connected to the legitimacy or permissibility of cryptocurrencies that, maybe not everybody would be involved in, but some people would, and that would be, initial coin offerings or ICOs. So you've got the offering, investing in the offering and buying a token up front, to kind of seed the startup of a cryptocurrency. And then you've got now the cryptocurrency is issued. You've got the mining of that, right? And then you've got the trade of it on exchanges. So there's those three levels, of that. And, there's a lot more research that needs to be done about those levels to ensure that there is, fairness and equity in the way that the way that they're done. But, in general, they're okay. I personally see a lot of the investment in cryptos to be similar to like penny stocks and the pump and dumps of the 90s and the 2000s. Everybody's trying to get into it. Everybody's trying to make a lot of money. Everybody hypes up a currency, put your money in. Other people come, pull it out. I'm just very wary of that. I don't think that.
Are you afraid of a bubble that might just burst?
Well, what I'm saying is that I have to be able to see e-commerce businesses adopting cryptocurrency to justify, all the different types of cryptocurrencies that are out there. I'm not seeing that rate of adaptation.
Well, here's my thing. A lot of these currencies are developing around Bitcoin, right? Meaning that they're dependent on Bitcoin, right?
So Bitcoin's like the master crypto, kind of?
According now, the way I look at it is Bitcoin is like the gold standard, right? And then there's like Litecoin, which is like the silver, right? So, but Bitcoin is like really, it controls a lot of the markets. If Bitcoin goes up, these other ones go up. If it goes down, the other ones go down. But again, this is not standard, but in most of the coins. But the problem is, even if online vendors and retailers are going to start accepting coins, they're going to have to consolidate, right? So where do all these coins go? Who takes them? what's the market share? Yeah. They have to find and I don't think they've addressed that issue yet. Right now, they just simply got over the issue that, hey, cryptocurrencies are not only for the black market, right? It's not only for illegal drug deals and weapons purchases, right? It's actually, it can be used for regular, trading of goods, right? But now they need to find a way to standardize it.
Yeah. I mean, the Vice did an interesting piece about about what cryptos are actually being used for. I mean, the volume, and I think Sim makes a good point that the volume of currencies and the number of currencies compared to the establishments, business establishments that are accepting that for services. There's kind of like a disparity in that ratio. So, like everything that I read is like, everybody's like, yeah, I bought some weed online and I paid for some anime or something like that. Right. So until we see more establishments kind of, accepting that, there still remains, I'm just skeptical about certain areas of it. I mean, I'm comfortable now with the idea of trading it, of using it. I do think though that there's, I can't rightfully go and tell somebody, oh, this is wrong for you to do, when in reality, in medieval Islamic society, you would have actually several currencies going around. You would have gold, you would have silver, you would have, and then different, you would have fulus. Fulus was a copper-based coin.
Yeah.
Right.
That at times was used according to its value, and at times was used according to its weightage, depending upon the acceptability in the market that it was used in, right? And so there's these specific rules for that. So I can't come and tell people, it's completely unacceptable. That's not like an ethical thing for me, knowing what I know. But at the same time, I feel responsible to tell people, understand what you're getting into and understand what you're investing in, because I mean, I see these mistakes all the time in business. I had a guy come up to me a couple of years ago. This is like right around 2008. Okay. Yeah. And he comes up to me at the masjid and he's like, man, I don't know what to do in life. I'm just going crazy. Like, what's the deal, man? He says, so, one of my friends comes and he tells me, you live in Texas, this is the land of oil and gas. Put all your money into oil and gas, man. Don't even think about it. Just put all your money in there. You're bound to make money. And then like the next day, the bottom market drops out of the market. Yeah. And he loses like his entire life savings.
Wow. So Joe, let me ask you something. So let's say, because most people, when it comes to cryptocurrency, they're just gonna buy some like a little bit of Bitcoin and then just hold on to it, and hopefully it makes some money later on. Like I'll give you an example. Like right now, I've got some Bitcoins and some Litecoins, right? I'm not hoping to trade them or do anything. I'm just hoping to sell them for like 5 years and hopefully it'll be worth some money, right? So I guess from that perspective, would that be considered something? I think a lot of people are wondering, is that acceptable for them to do, halal for them to do? Can they just buy it?
Yeah, that's acceptable. I mean, that's no different than, for example, me traveling to Turkey for the summer, right? And you taking dollars and buying a bunch of lira, and then coming back 2 summers later, and the value of those lira have increased. So then I put them back into dollars, and I come home with more dollars than I originally put in. That's completely fine.
Okay.
For you to hold on to a currency, because currency, in their essence are assets. The only difference is because they're, because of the issue of fungibility, then and because of their storage of value, then you have to follow the rules of currency exchange. Like we said, is if you're going to trade, then you trade according, to a spot transaction, at that day's rate, and you're fine.
Got you. So how does this play into like into a will? Like, I mean, like, let's say you're calculating, meaning like, inheritance. If it's all around, like, it can be spotty and we don't know right now, and you want to just drop a will, but right now we don't really know where cryptocurrency is going these days. So how do you tie that into like a proposed will that you're going to do?
Well, I mean, if somebody owns crypto, in any asset that you own, it's extremely important that you have a record of that. So your will is one document in a good estate plan, right? So you're going to have, you're going to have a will. You're probably going to have a healthcare directive. You might have a durable power of attorney for, if you're incapacitated. You might, some people might even do like a trust to hold certain assets in. There'll be guardianship documents. There's like a whole suite. And we're actually developing that suite with my wasiya, and it should be out soon. To kind of give people that suite of documents. But one thing that's ancillary, to an estate plan is just having your life in order, right? And a lot of people don't think about this. I'll give you an example. A guy dies. He's worked corporate for 20, 30 years. His wife comes home, she's getting over it. She's like, okay, I need to start tapping into some of these funds. She calls the company her husband works for. I need to get a payout from his 401k to take care of some of these debts. And the HR person is like, well, sure, just send me your driver's license, all the information, we'll start the process. She does that. She says, I'm sorry, I can't help you. She says, why not? I'm his wife. You're his wife, but you're not listed as his benefactor on the 401k.
Wow.
What do you mean? Was your husband previously married? Yes, he was. Well, his ex-wife is now getting his 401k.
Ouch.
That's
so
rough.
Whether you're talking about crypto, you're talking about real estate, you're talking about, insurance policies, 401ks, bank accounts, you have POD. If you have a separate bank account than your spouse, you need to make sure that your POD, payable on death, is designated in that account so that if you die, they're not spending months haggling with banks trying to get access to funds. But all of that is in addition to a will. The will brings it together and it empowers your relatives to make those moves for you when you die. But if you have it, then they'll be able to do it. It'll just take longer. And if you don't, it's going to be a nightmare for them. So what's really essential is that you have a legally valid Sharia compliant will, and you also have your paperwork in order. That we have a checklist from my wasiyah of what people should look out for. Here's the documents that you should kind of all stick in one place or put in a safe deposit box, or at least have a list of, so that people know what to look for. And so if you own crypto, you're going to want to list that there. Now Mort, how would I know, if I was your relative and you passed away and I heard that you had crypto, how would I benefit from your crypto after your death? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, the only way would be to have access to my wallet.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because I think that you can store these wallets, these keys, on either on your hard drive or a thumb drive, and whoever has access to your wallet can be able to use your currency.
Huh.
Okay, so basically, if a person passes away and they don't leave access to their wallet, tough luck.
Yep.
Tough luck. That money's stuck.
I see what you're saying.
Wow.
Hey, Joe, I wanted to get your take on, just to switch gears a little bit. We alluded to a little earlier, but there's that article, these dudes in the UK in these really gaudy looking suits. You know what I'm talking about? Like they're something called OneCoin. You'll be billionaires by 2020, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That was more MLM stuff more so than a knock on cryptocurrencies, wasn't it? Would you say?
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, I forget their name. I think their names are like the Islam Brothers or something like that.
They're like my cousins.
Wait, is this like that whole magnificent event where they come in and they coach you or something like that, right? Is this what it is?
Something like that, okay. Right.
Oh,
right.
man, I was invited to that.
Yeah,
Really?
Me too.
They had one in Chicago?
They want no. Actually, what's funny is my brother actually flew out to the UK, I think, a little while ago.
Oh, really?
I don't know if it was this one, but one of it's an entrepreneurial type.
Oh, you're talking about Muslim Mastermind.
Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
You're talking about something else.
Okay,
no,
yeah.
I'm not talking about Mastermind.
But this one I'm talking about had an ad on Facebook, and it was like, oh, these mentors will sit there with you and walk you through it.
Help you create a franchise business or something?
Out of existing franchises that are already there.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I think that's what it is, yeah. So they basically tap into people who have supposedly already made it, and they're going to mentor you on how you can, and give you an option of selected franchises that are already, booming, and they'll mentor you on how to actually get those started, and you become a billionaire.
Right.
Essentially. That's what they're trying to promise.
Pretty much. I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, but that's different than what these guys are doing with the Muslim Mastermind. Is I met a few of these guys. One of them lives in Dubai. Does business there. He was, I'm drawing Kam
Mirza.
Kam Mirza. And he was gracious enough to kind of show me around. He lives in around that,
He actually has, I think he says he has an apartment in the Burj Khalifa.
Yeah, so he showed us around the Burj Khalifa. He's like a friend of a friend. So I was there on business and he said, hey, call this guy up. He'll let you know about doing business over there. He was quite nice. And he told me about these things, the Muslim Mastermind things that they're doing. And I have a few friends that have gone. They said they liked it. One of my friends went to the one in London, and he said it was a good networking event. But it's different than what these guys, the Islam brothers, were doing. You're right that they were basically doing like multi-level marketing for crypto, right? So they're using, these multi-level marketing techniques to get people to come and invest in a cryptocurrency. And then I think later on the bottom fell out on them. They had some problems, and I think they might have ran into legal trouble in the UK as well. For some reason though, man, there's like all of these. There's so many scams come out of the UK.
It's that British accent. It convinces you.
That's like a friend of mine said. It's like a friend of mine said. You can't make a movie about the classic period without British actors or people feigning British. Like look at The Patriot with Mel Gibson, where they're all speaking in American accents. It bombed at the box office.
Yeah.
No, I heard one of my friends was talking about something. He's like, I don't know what it is about Americans, but any kind of like late night ad or something, like it's just multi-level ad. Like it's always a British guy talking, and for some reason Americans just buy it because it's a British accent. They're like, oh yeah, great, it must be true.
Dude, even for Dean's Solely Publications. Birmingham.
Is that Americans' equivalent of colonial mindset? You know how we make fun of our Desi parents and how they look up to white people for stuff, and that might be America's colonial mindset, that they look at the British accent with intelligence.
We look up to the original white people.
Right. So for practicality purposes, Joe, what do you have a recommendation you can give us on how we approach cryptocurrencies? If someone wants to invest, would you what's your take?
Say like wait and see approach, or?
I'm kind of new to the area of investing. I personally, I've never invested myself. So, my studies and reading of it is just completely theoretical, speaking to people in the industry, both people that have traded, people that are, on the back end, that type of thing. So, I can't make an investment recommendation, but like I say, for anyone that's investing in anything, do your homework up front and make sure that you're doing it through, a legit marketplace. And there's several, marketplaces now that online markets, where people can, buy and sell, and, just make sure that everything checks out. It's kind of cool and edgy to say it's decentralized and no government has control over it. But guess what? If there's absolutely no government regulation, then, it's going to be that much more easier for somebody to walk away with all of your money one day. And anybody who's done penny stock trading would know that, it's, over the counter trading of, stocks that are, less than $5 in value. Companies go, boom and bust all the time. And, it's part of this, it's part of the risk and the inherent risks that are involved with businesses. But, you have to educate yourself about those risks before, I don't want anybody coming back and say, oh, listen to the Mad Mamluks, and one of those guys on there had it, and whoever the guest, I don't even know who the guest's name was, but he said it was all right. So I did it and lost all my money. I hate a stock.
I think one people, I can say, I put some money into it, and I think I can say this about it. It's definitely not one of those short-term money makers. If you're going to be in it, it's for the long haul. It's not something you're going to put in your money tomorrow. You can't just quit your job and put your money into Bitcoins, right? Yeah. It's something that it's like an investment that you'll make. You'll win, you might lose. So it's like an investment.
If you invested like $100, what was it, 10 years ago?
Well, I'll put it this way.
You would have been a multimillionaire.
I started with Litecoin, and when I did buy it originally, it was at $20 a coin. Yeah. And now when I checked it last time, it was close to $70 a coin.
Oh wow!
So now Mort's buying pizzas for $10,000.
Yeah,
yeah, but what I mean is that, but again, like you have to be patient though, right? You can't expect your money, because some days the market will drop. Like for example, some things will affect the way the coin pricing. For example, in China, they rejected that ICO of a particular coin, and that caused the market to drop a little bit, right? But then you waited 3 or 4 weeks, and then it started climbing back up, right? So you can't be sitting there watching this. At least in my opinion, I'm not sitting there watching the coin every day, right? It's more of a long-term thing.
Yeah, and volatility is natural to any market. I mean, value investors with stock market do this all the time. They buy a stock not to be able to sell it tomorrow or a week or a month later, but to sell it in 10 years. And that's the whole, Warren Buffett, what's his venture's name? I'm drawing a blank right now.
Berkshire Hathaway?
Berkshire, yeah.
No, but Berkshire Hathaway is the company that he owns, but he has a Charlie Munger, I think, is another. This whole value investing thing is, the principle is if you wouldn't own it for 10 years, don't own it for 10 minutes.
Nice.
So the idea is that, I don't have to get flustered about volatility and hiccups in the stock market because I'm looking to cash out a decade from now. I'm not looking to cash out in 10 minutes. And that's a valid investment strategy. Some people do it. Some people day trade or swing trade and they ride the volatility. Here's the difference, right? Here's the kind of the kicker for this versus crypto. I invested in an oil and gas company a few years ago, right? And it turned out that this company was keeping a lot of debts off of the balance sheet that were affecting the company's ability to operate. And so it essentially had to go belly up. And so the company is there, but they can't operate. So they started this, what they said was they wanted to sell everything off, liquidate the company. And, that could work but there was market conditions, and this was around the whole time where the price of oil dropped down to $30, $40. A whole bunch of issues that came up at that time. I get a letter in the mail saying there's a class action lawsuit against the company, sign up, and, therefore we can prevent you basically being the victim of a fire sale for this company. And so everybody signs up. The company is there's interdiction or, a stop put on the company's business so that they can't go and do things that are going to negatively affect the value of the company anymore. And you can either, hold on or wait for a settlement later on. Right?
Right.
That's possible because of government oversight. That's possible because I know who's on the board of directors. I know who the management team was. I know that that they're servable, right? That somebody can send a warrant to them. Somebody can serve them with papers. They can be taken to court. How does that happen in the area in cryptocurrency, especially for those people who would say, well, you're saying that it's a currency, but in reality it's just a digital asset and, we can trade assets freely and so on and so forth. Fine, but where's my legal recourse? And that's a huge problem that I have with a lot of cryptocurrencies. Where's the legal resource if this goes belly up? And it doesn't seem to be there because of the nature of the coin, the nature of it being decentralized, no government oversight.
That goes back to unregulation.
No one can freeze the account. No one can take
pseudo-anonymous. Yeah.
Right. So, Joe, let me ask you a question. This question kind of came in from somebody that we knew this topic was going to come in. So there's a particular currency out there, and right now they're allowing people to gain a 5% interest if they sign up for it right now. In the wallet. And what happens is, along with buying the currency, there is certain other benefits that you get, like first access to coins and things like that. What they were wondering was, could he invest in that coin, then obviously just donate the interest, but still keep the benefit of the coin and the first offerings and things like that? Would that be something allowed for him to do if he wanted to invest in that coin?
So this 5% is coming to him how?
Well, they're just giving him 5%. They call it interest, meaning that they're going to give him a 5% profit share if he signs up now, based on being early birds, I guess.
Is this an ICO or have they already?
They haven't. No, they haven't. They haven't had an ICO yet.
Okay, so essentially they're saying that if you if you come in and fund the startup of this coin, we're going to give you a pref. We're going to give you a preferred return an increase on the cash value of what you put in of 5%.
Yeah, well, so the way I understand it is they have plans to do things in the future, and they're saying, listen, if you buy the currency right now and you keep it in our wallet, I guess they're trying to build up their coin base. So if you keep it in there and pending on the profits they make, they'll give you 5% interest, like as a benefit to it.
I don't know if the use of the term interest here is appropriate. Mm-hmm. That what we would generally think of as interest,
right?
Because what I understand from it is they're saying, if you come in and buy this currency as an early adopter, then we will give you 5% of our returns on our wallet transactions and things like that. So I would have to look at the actual offering, but from just off the top of my head, I'm not seeing how it's on par with like riba.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I might be wrong.
Okay, fair enough.
So you recently had a few Facebook posts recently that were talking about conflict resolution and mediation. Just to switch gears a little bit and talk about something else for any listeners who are not interested in cryptocurrency at all. Talk a little bit about.
We need to do Mahin's earlier thing. We were talking about wills. Mahin's like, moving on.
Yeah. He's like, I don't want to leave anything for my family.
Real segue on the wills. I was thinking about it midway talking about crypto. I actually had to will my sneaker collection. I switched it. I used to have my brother to will it. He was my benefactor, but then I changed it to my daughter because my brother he doesn't know how to take care of shoes. Like he'll just beat them up and they'll become beaters and they'll fall apart.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. I mean, plus, I'm sure it's sizable, and I've seen some of your kicks before, so they're probably expensive as well.
Yeah.
And based on that, your inheritors have a right to that.
Right.
Unless of course you can evaluate everything and then separate that and then say, these items and the value thereof, go to my daughter's portion of inheritance plus anything above and beyond that's a gift from me. And then your other inheritors have to say, okay, we approve the gift.
Yeah, actually, I gotta add the new baby now to the list. Yeah, I forgot about her. She's not my favorite though. The older one's still my favorite.
You're not supposed to have a favorite, Mahin.
Why not?
At least don't admit it. At least don't admit it.
Yeah.
Until she gets old enough. Yeah.
Imagine his kids listening to this episode years later.
We'll be like in a Malthusian agrarian apocalypse by that time, so your daughter won't hear this podcast.
Yeah. We'll have ascended to AI, and we're living with artificial beings, as Elon Musk try to convince us of.
Well, according to Alex Jones,
or some
Egypt
kind of
and
lame
Mars.
Cloud Atlas situation.
Right. That's a great movie, by the way. Cloud Atlas. Check it out.
Yeah, I beg to differ, but okay.
Oh, you didn't like it? Oh, man.
No, I did not. But anyway, you were mentioning some of the Facebook posts.
Yeah, man. So we're not going to mention any names, but the news is we're talking a lot about conflict resolution and mediation, and you had a lot of advice to your readers on Facebook about how to handle that. So, what is your approach?
So, I put out 2 articles recently, and the first one was about defamation under Islamic law, and the kind of the moral of the story there is that there are definitely things that are happening within the Muslim community. People make claims about others all the time, whether they be leaders or laymen, whether it be speaking about sisters in the community in unsavory terms, whether it be a board member. A lot of times people make very dangerous claims and ambiguous claims about others and don't really understand that not only is this something that is wrong, in front of God, but there can be legal culpability attached to it as well. There's, so the fuqaha will mention, like if a person comes and says, "Ya kalb," you dog, right? Ya gahba, you whore, which for Arabic listeners, it's an actual word. It's not a curse word. Even though that word is used as a curse word. So I don't know if you guys want to beat that out.
No.
Yeah, because I heard that. I'm like, wow.
We're laughing.
Because in my region, that's like a really, it's pretty hard.
It's a really bad word. It's a really bad word.
Yeah.
I'll add it to my vocabulary.
Oh, man.
Yeah, maybe we can
just say it's locker room
talk.
talk.
You know what? I think we should probably just keep it because it actually is a real word, right?
Yeah,
so there's no problem with that.
So it's interesting. I was speaking to a friend of mine who is from a Bedouin family, and he was saying how they went out. They had a family meeting, and people from the desert came, and people that are still living nomadic lives came out, and he said it's so interesting how they use words that for us ring in our ears. We don't think of the use of those words in those ways because we're so far from the original or the ancient kind of linguistic meaning. Sure. And he said, one of them said, إذا ما سويت كده يعني قحبناك. If you don't do this or that, then we're going to consider you a gahba. So he was like, what the heck? How does this compute? I don't know what to do. So he teaches in a university. So he went and he spoke to some language professors and people that are knowledgeable of Bedouin dialects. And they said, well, the original meaning of qahaba is khawana, is to, or khana, to have deceit, to deceive.
Yeah, treacherous, right? Like treachery.
Yeah, to be treacherous. Yeah. So, when they said gahabnak, we're going to consider you treacherous. If you don't do what we need, then we're just going to consider you like a deceitful person. So anyway, getting back to that, there's all these things, interesting things that the fuqaha mentioned, like the Hanabila specifically mentioned if a person says, Ya ibn al-halal, Ya halal ibn al-halal. If they say, oh halal, son of halal, this can be considered a form of defamation, because you're calling them halal, but the inverse is what you're intending, that they're actually involved in haram. Saying things like that. So the idea is that
so basically defamation is considered a crime, basically.
Yeah, people are doing and saying things about others and not taking into consideration that the ambiguity of their statements is morally problematic and can be legally problematic as well. The hadith in Bukhari where Aisha radiallahu anha, she made a movement with her hand as Safiya was walking away to indicate that she was short. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لَقَدْ قُلْتِ كَلِمَةً لَوْ مُزِّجَتْ بِالْبَحْرِ لَمَزَجَتْهُ. You've said a word that if it were mixed with the ocean, that it would permeate it completely, meaning in its pollutive power, right?
Yeah.
And that was just, indicating, kind of on slyly that she was short. While saying things like this and making ambiguous statements about people that, the Mad Mamluks, they deal with inappropriate topics on their podcast, right? Somebody hears that and they're going to start thinking that, you guys are discussing, I don't want to say it because I don't want somebody to have a soundbite, but, discussing things which are clearly haram. I've already said enough, questionable terms today.
Right.
They discuss inappropriate topics on their podcast. Well, anybody who hears that is going to think, oh, well, what are they talking about? Are they talking about something which is as haram? Are these guys on there talking about, drinking or zina or what? And in reality, it's only inappropriate because of maybe my personal, intimations or my personal leanings as to the appropriateness or acceptability of those actions. So, that ambiguity, while it doesn't reach the level of slander, which under Islamic law is called qadf, and is a punishable offense, it's one of the 7 punishable, hudud punishments under Islamic law. There's slander, adultery, or fornication, public drunkenness. What are the others? Just trying to think off the top of my head. Theft, highway robbery, brigandry, apostasy, slander. Those are the 7. Then it's less than slander, but it's still kind of the same. So almost all jurists agree that if a person is making what they'll term as defamation, or they call it tashhir, or ishanat sum'a, or ihanat sum'a, or tashwih sum'a, or they call it al-qadhfu bima dun zina, slander with something less than zina. So they can consider it a part of slander. They say because it's not expressly saying that you accuse the person of fornication, then we can't apply the head punishment to you. But the judge has the ability to apply a discretionary punishment to you because of your attacking this person without reason, or maybe you have a reason, but you're not being forward with what you're doing. And I think is an important point here to mention, because somebody said it to me, and the point here is not to say that if somebody accuses another person of abuse, that they should be charged with defamation. The point here is to say is that if somebody's going to accuse a person of abuse, they should be straightforward about their accusation, right?
I'm sorry, Joe. I was just going to ask you something. So I've noticed this. So, I don't want to bring up the whole scandal and things like that, but in recent events,
I don't watch that show anyway. So
yeah, exactly. So people basically have basically accused certain people of being like, they're calling them basically predators and rapist supporters, and they're throwing around these allegations now. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's happened to me. Like on Twitter, I just said simply that we need to have the facts before anything, right? And I was called like a
pervert sympathizer. Yeah,
pervert sympathizer, or rapist sympathizer, or female manipulator. And I'm thinking like, wow, aren't they held accountable for these things? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely incorrect for people to make those kind of accusations. And so we have two things here. If you're involved in a situation, right? If you're involved in a situation, then, and you have firsthand knowledge, then take it to the authorities, right? If there's actual predatory acts that are going on, if there is abuse, if there is, illicit sexual relationships, if there's something which is an adjudicable, offense, something that can be taken to court, then you need to go and do that for the protection of yourself and the protection of other people that are involved, right? But to kind of intimate and ambiguously infer that people are involved in questionable things when they may or may not be, I mean, you can ruin people's lives, and you can ruin your own. I remember in the 90s, there was an imam in Texas, and he was teaching in a Sunday school, and then there was some tension between him and one of the administrators, and that administrator was always getting on his case. And then he teaches Sunday school one Sunday, comes to work on Monday, and finds the cops there, and says, "What's happened?" Well, they're saying that you inappropriately touched the little girl on Sunday, and that we need to investigate you for child molestation. So obviously he doesn't continue working at this place. The investigation comes up with nothing, and it turns out that all he had done was there's a little girl who was jumping around in her seat while he was speaking. He put his hands on her shoulders and he told her, "Sit down, please." He put his hand on her shoulder and pushed her down.
Wow.
And because of that, he had to basically leave the city, go to another city, start a whole new life, live in kind of obscurity, even though he was a very talented person, live in obscurity because of a false accusation that the administrator admitted to later was false. Like years down the line, the administrator comes out and says, "Yeah, well, I only wanted to get him out of the position. I didn't want to ruin his life with an accusation of being a child molester."
Unbelievable.
Right? So, people have to realize that they're playing with people's lives, and this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-bayyinatu 'ala al-mudda'i wal-yaminu 'ala man ankar." Before that, he says, "Law u'tu an-nasu bida'awihim لطلبوا الناس دماء أموال أناس ودماءهم ولكن البينة على المدعي واليمين على من أنكر." If people were to be giving according to their claims, they would claim the lives and the wealth of other people. However, the onus of proof is on the claimant, and an oath is incumbent upon the person that denies it. So you can't just make claims like that. And when you say somebody that, "Oh, you're a pervert," or "You're a pervert sympathizer," you're making a moral judgment against that person that is defamatory and can affect them in their livelihood. And what I lay out in the article is that these are things which are offenses that can be taken to court, even under Islamic law. My advice is, and I'm no one to tolerate, sexual abuse. I'm no one to tolerate, I'm no one to tolerate predatory behavior. But my point is that if you are in a situation of abuse, if you are in a situation where someone is preying on you, then you need to seek help from qualified people. People who are, for example, if you know of an instance of child abuse, you should report that to a welfare officer or a
Department of Child Services.
Child services. Report it to child services because they have the training and the ability to identify actual abuse. So there are cases where the police are called for instances of abuse, and the person who is abusing that child is eloquent and nice enough to where the police just walk away, and they don't see any abuse. Well, obviously they're not trained to see it. So you need to go and speak to qualified, child care workers, welfare workers, people that are in, health and human resources, child protection, people that are in those the administrations differ state to state, but it's important that you speak to people that can recognize signs of abuse. There's a really interesting documentary called Mommy Dead and Dearest, or Mommy Dearest. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it.
No.
It's an HBO documentary, and it's about a girl who was raised her entire life to think that she was sick. She was diagnosed with Munchausen's syndrome by proxy, where her mother raised her to think that she was mentally incapacitated, that she was sick, that she was younger than she actually was, and she was, separated. Her father was not around. The father called the police several times. The police went out there. They took sympathy on the woman, and it turned out that she was abusing her to the point where she developed an online relationship with a young man who was mentally challenged, and then they conspired to murder the mother so that she would be free of her forever. and it happened. And so they're interviewing this girl when she's in jail. And one of the big problems that was involved was that people who were who knew the situation didn't know how to identify abuse. So, my message is if you've got an accusation to make, then be straightforward, be express about it, and report it to the proper authorities. This stuff of, I'm going to get these family members involved and that family members involved and this community leader involved and that community leader involved. You're only harming yourself and the abused person in the end, because those people have no authority to take any sort of action against that person. And you can actually lionize that person if you don't come correct with your case. And at the same time, you can actually destroy their lives and be culpable for that on the day of judgment if you have no proof. The Prophet ﷺ said that one of us will, say a statement, يعني لا يلقي له بالا يهوي بها في نار جهنم 70 خريفا. We'll say a statement that we won't give any weight to, and then it will throw us into the throes of hell for 70 autumns. And we might say a statement of good that we don't give any weight to, and it might take us into the highest levels of Jannah. But we have to be very careful about, those things that we attest to, and that we, one of the major sins in Islam is shahadat az-zur, is false testimony. And so by making ambiguous statements, we're kind of borderline, falsely testifying against people and causing and complicating issues and actually cheapening the plight of people who are actually abused. And it's like the story of the boy who cried wolf.
Sure. One thing that, I know Sim and I were talking to some brothers and some students of knowledge, and some people seem to be upset about your post on arbitration, that we shouldn't have an arbitration policy in place here because there are no standards. And they can't wrap their heads around that. Do you have anything further to comment on that specific topic?
Well, my article about arbitration hasn't even come out yet. So when I wrote this, I got feedback from different people, community leaders, community members, general public, and even some people who aren't Muslim who wrote to me saying, "Hey, this is really helpful for me for understanding the process of Islamic law." And so what I decided to do was to write a follow-up where I would talk about dispute resolution. And so, the ultimate form of dispute resolution is going to court, right? Going in front of a judge who has the legal authority to make a decision on how something will will result out of a certain dispute, and actually enforcing that ruling. And the reason why I started with talking about courts and I didn't go right to arbitration is because arbitration, reconciliation, all of those things are actually contingent upon understanding who can be a judge, what can a judge decide on, right? What are the qualifications of a judge? What are the skills that they should have, which are different than the qualifications? What's the process that they use for analyzing evidence? What is considered evidence? When is evidence admissible? When is it not? When do you use direct evidence versus corroborating evidence versus circumstantial evidence? And I lay all that out in the follow-up that I released I think 2 days ago. The next step is going to be arbitration and arbitrability, which is we can have an arbitration council, right? But arbitration in common law is almost exactly the same as it is under Islamic law. And that is that arbitration is only valid because arbitration is essentially a contract that, like, say, for example, Mahin and you and I, we have a difference over you trying to sell me Amway, right? And so we say, man, we don't want to go to court, but let's get let's get Mort and SIM to decide for us. And so we sign a contract between ourselves designating Mort and SIM to look at this case for us and decide how we should proceed. Right? Now, when they make a decision, we are ethically, morally bound to follow that decision. And if we don't, then one of us, the offending party who doesn't hold up their end of the bargain, can then take that to court, and then the courts can enforce the decision if the decision was rendered properly by people who are qualified and with the requisite stipulations for how a decision is to be rendered. Again, important reason why we have to understand the process, right? But notice here that this is a decision that is between two private parties about a private matter, right? Mm-hmm. Issues that are public matters, right? That are the jurisdiction or the foray of the state, that are the privilege of the sovereign ruler, government, state, whatever, to decide matters in. Issues that deal with public welfare, issues that deal with criminality, issues that deal with politics, issues that deal with third-party rights. These are all invalid to be arbitrated on. Mm-hmm. So I can't sign an arbitration agreement for the custody of my child, because in the custody of a child, what is paramount is not the agreeability and the consideration of two private parties, but the welfare of the child. And that can only be determined by an impartial third party, right? Who has legal authority over that child in the case or in the absence of those parents, i.e. a judge or somebody from the appointed person from the government. So, people want to talk about arbitration and reconciliation. We have to follow the rules of arbitration and reconciliation under Islamic law, which state that there are certain things that we cannot arbitrate on. So if a person is saying that, if I accuse another person of abuse, then that can't go to arbitration. That has to go to court, because not only is it an issue of a personal right being violated, but it's a danger to the public as well. So what am I supposed to do? Just, we'll make an agreement that, if you just, live in obscurity and hush and stay hush hush, I won't report your abuse. But what am I saying? I'm essentially saying that I will agree to allow you to abuse people in silent, right? In private, as long as you don't go in the public eye. It's extremely dangerous, because that person could continue to abuse people in private. They could move to another state, another country, and the truth would never be known. Or we might be doing them wrong by scaring them into submission, and not allowing them to live out their lives to the fullest with full freedoms that a person shouldn't be afraid to live their life because of the accusations of another. They should have their day in court. And so by taking issues of abuse or issues that can affect the public welfare to arbitration or reconciliation, we're essentially stopping people from having their day at court, from having their rights determined in this life. It's extremely ethically, morally problematic, if in addition to the fact that it's legally problematic.
Yeah, I think one of the other issues is that if they try to do this, arbitration in private and nobody knows about it, because obviously they're trying to pull this person away from the platform and then just kind of make them go away. When it does come to light, when the community does find out about it, they're going to look back at these people and say, wait a minute, you guys knew about all of these things in the whole time and you didn't, kind of protect us. And that's kind of a problem.
Yeah, and hold on,
that's a huge problem.
And the other thing is the abuse part of it. It's probably the sense that as Joe's talking, I'm like, well, it's probably it might not even be abuse according to U.S. legal law. So that's why you don't take it to court. It's a subjective level of abuse that's kind of been concocted by maybe our own cultural or religious paradigms.
Well, they're calling it spiritual abuse.
Yeah, which is
not recognized by the law.
There are, as far as I recall, there are cases of spiritual abuse, right? That have actually gone to court. Because when a person is in the position of a teacher, of a clergyman, of whatever, there is legal precedent even for that. And I think it doesn't. I don't think that it has as much to do with the subjectivity of our Muslim cultures, plural, but I think it has to do with somewhat has to do with the fear of actually going to court. And so there's some people that are, oh no, non-Muslim courts, we shouldn't go there, we can't go there, that type of thing, that moralizing over going to court or not. And this will actually be the follow-up to the arbitration article, which will be this issue. And here I was wishing Sheikh Amr was on, because I would have loved to benefit from him on this issue, is al-dhafar bil-haq, is this principle in fiqh that basically, reclaiming one's rights. How do you reclaim your rights when you have limited recourse? So let's say, for example, somebody steals really basic example. Somebody steals your bike, right?
Right.
Steals your bike. You're walking down the street. You look behind. You see like a glimmer behind a fence. Oh, it's the reflector for my bike. I think that's my bike. You run up to it. You see your bike locked behind somebody's fence, right? Now, generally, it's illegal for you to jump a person's fence.
Right.
But you know that this is your bike, and you know that the only way you're going to be able to get that bike is by jumping the fence and throwing your bike over the fence. Because by the time you call the cops or you speak to that person's parents or whatever, you're never going to see that bike again. Right? So you jump the fence and you grab your bike. You're riding your bike down the street. The guy comes in and he says, "Hey man, you took that bike out of my backyard." "Yeah, but you stole it from mine in the first place." So then you guys you're either going to scrap and get, fight in the street, or you're just going to leave it at that. Right? So that's a very juvenile, basic example of, having limited recourse and reclaiming one's right to something.
I think we've all done that actually when we were kids.
I have. I had a box for my bike.
Yeah, man. We grew up in some rough neighborhoods, so
I can relate to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the point here is that, okay, now let's say, for example, I'm in a business agreement with another guy, and this guy cheats me, and then I go and say, "But look, man, you cheated me. You owe me money. The business was a bunk business. You gotta pay me back." And he says, "No, I'm not going to pay you back." "Okay, I'm going to take you to court." "Oh, astaghfirullah, brother. How can you go to the kuffar? How dare you? That's not even a consideration here. I'm not going to a non-Muslim court for virtue of them being non-Muslim. I'm not going to a non-Muslim court for virtue of me siding with you or siding with them against your faith. I'm going to a court because they're the ones that can restore my rights that you've taken from me. So I'm not morally culpable or wrong and ethically wrong as a Muslim to go to a non-Muslim court to do that, because that's the recourse. By you cheating me, that's the only recourse that you left for me, right? So that'll be the follow-up, inshallah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, to me, I don't even see why it's in question. I mean, that's total...
I mean, it's kind of like a no-brainer. But when you're dealing with people who want to make like really subjective appeals to Muslim identity, and I mean, just the whole thing about Muslim identity politics, that a lot of people that are involved in a lot of Muslim organizations and movements that are here in the West are the result of Muslim identity politics that have kind of boiled over from the Muslim world, and they're remnants of these movements and these ideologies that weren't necessarily grounded in an understanding of traditional knowledge, and it kind of permeates a lot of different areas of American Muslim life. Whether it be these attitudes towards recourse, whether it be simply, how we write the documents, the charter documents, for our mosques and our Islamic organizations. I mean, how many mosques and Islamic centers and Islamic organizations and leaders of boards and stuff like that have you heard give the khutbah of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu when they're elected? Right?
None. Never.
You never heard them?
I've never heard them.
I haven't either.
Me neither.
That's surprising to me. That's very surprising to me, because I have, at least and maybe it's a north-south thing, because here in the South, I've heard numerous times where people have used the khutbah of Abu Bakr becoming Khalifa as like their introductory speech to assuming a board position or becoming an emir or something like that.
Yeah, no, in our areas, dude, we don't even know who the board members are. Like, it's just like, they're like the Mr. Burns in the background. Like, we don't even know who they are. They just show up on a Sunday luncheon and, oh, that's the board member? Okay, cool.
Well, because you never see him at the masjid, like, and you find out, like, I remember one of my good friends, his dad was on the board of some mega mosque.
Dude, I just found out my uncle's on the board at Foundation. I didn't even know that.
You know what I mean? But and my friend was arguing with his dad, like, Dad, you don't even pray. Why are you on the board of the masjid? He's like, shut up.
I paid money for this.
Exactly.
A lot of it's kind of like an endowment. Like, we had a particular member in a certain masjid here where it's just like he just paid a lump sum of money, and he got like a board position. So no one even saw him in the masjid until like Eid, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
So that you bring up a good point, and that's kind of where I was going with this, is that we'll find organizations and mosques and things like that they'll form their documents, their charter documents, their bylaws around this idea of khilafah. And when they speak about elections for boards and stuff like that, they form it around the ideas of khilafah and shura, as if they're creating an Islamic government. Whereas traditionally in Islamic societies, masjids were not khilafas, they were not shuras, they were awqaf, they were endowments that were run by the religious leadership for the religious benefit of the populaces that they served. They weren't bureaucratic institutions. And so that idea of creating a bureaucratic institution simply because we live in a non-Muslim land is problematic and has to be looked at in more depth. But my point being is, or I think we're getting off track here to another topic entirely. But the point stands is that we have a hierarchy of authority and power within Islamic law, and even us as Muslims, we are limited in where and how we are allowed to apply our Islamic law, depending upon our venue, the jurisdiction that we have, and the subject matter that we're dealing with. So it's vigilantism and individuals coming through and placing themselves as judge, jury, and executioner is just unacceptable, right? And our tradition states as much. And it's imperative that we reiterate what the tradition states so that nobody can make a claim about Islamic law that is wrong or at least or questionable in the least.
Sure. Well, that's pretty logical.
Man, I have no brainer. Like he would say, no brainer.
Yeah, I think once you got to take the emotion out of it and like kind of like analyze it from that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think just recently as a lot of this stuff just started coming out into our community, and we started getting messages from our friends and relatives. I mean, the rise or the swell of emotion in everyone's hearts and minds, I think it just kind of clouded everyone's judgment, and I think everyone just
I think most people are just more emotional than they are logical. I see that a lot of times.
Yeah, and I think everyone said, okay, well, we as a community, we're just going to become the judge, jury, and executioner, and we're just bring out these incidences, and
but then we'll decide. But then they want like equality and rights in other areas, where they're like, oh yeah, you know what, we have equal prostitution here.
Imagine if like Muslims were dealt like this, in terms of after 9/11 and things like this.
Outraged.
Imagine if like white America, decided to be judge, jury, and executioner about our families and whether we were, terrorists or not. I mean, these are things that are obvious, but you have to just remove emotion to actually really understand how important these things are.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, you raise an important point, and that is that, when we allow these attitudes to become prevalent, where we take things into our own hands, we actually allow for abuse and predatory actions to continue. Because who's to say that the vanguard that we select to be against a certain predatory individual and or individuals now, they themselves don't form a club and become predators themselves, right? Who's to say that that these people that we uphold as moral paragons or whatever the word is, and see them as the ultimate representatives of all which is good and wholesome, they themselves don't manipulate that for their own political, social, or even emotional gain. So I think that the idea of having checks and balances and having review, independent third-party review of disputes is extremely important for the health of the community as a whole, and it kind of keeps everything in check. And I mean that across the board, men, women, young and old. We have to be very cognizant of the fact that we can't make false allegations, but if we're going to make an allegation, we should make the allegation truthfully, and we should report those alleged abuses to the proper authorities to get the people help that need it, and to minimize the negative effects on the lives of the abused, most importantly, because people don't realize that people that are actually abused, just the process of reporting that can be very, very toiling, can be very, very emotionally, it can scar people for a very long time. And at the same time, we do have to remove emotion and be fair and say that somebody who's accused of something, they do deserve their day in court, and we can't make ourselves, judge, jury, and executioner. A friend of mine mentioned something that was interesting. He was like, you guys mentioned 9/11. He said, "Man, imagine if this happened like anywhere else in the world. What the reaction of the native populations of those places would have been." And I don't want to go into like anecdotal things, because then I can myself be accused of being an imperialist, colonialist, white sympathizer.
Right.
But it's frightening to think about, but it means that it's just it's a message to us that we have to stand for justice.
Right.
Absolutely.
شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم. Oh, you who believe, stand for justice, and be witnesses to truth, even for Allah, even if it's against yourselves. That's the imperative that we have as believers.
So
yeah. Well, jazakallah Joe for coming on again. Really appreciate. You'll be our first official third time guest. Yeah. So.
Oh wow. Okay. Inshallah.
So
I expect a party when I get to like the 5-time club.
Right. Yeah. And your website is joebradford.net still? Is that where people can
Yeah, so my website's joebradford.net. For those of you who want to create your Islamic will, go to mywasiya.com. That's MYWASSIYAH.com.
And it'll be in the show notes as well. So if you are driving right now, you can just check the show notes when you get home. So.
Yeah, and there's an article on my website called "What is Estate Planning," where I kind of lay out everything for creating, wills and all those other documents. That'll have the links there too. And yeah, that's everybody check out the articles. Let me know what you think about it, and appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely. For our listeners out there, you can email us at themadmamluks@gmail.com. You please like our Facebook page. You can follow us on Twitter, and we're also on Instagram. For our special guest, Sheikh Joe Bradford, and my co-hosts, Mort and SIM, This is Mahin signing off for the Mad Mamluks. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.